Good evening. Today is Thursday, January 18th. We'll now call the City Council special meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. Item number 2, our roll call. We do have a quorum of council. Item number 3, our public comments. City Secretary, do we have any public comment?
No, Mr. Mayor, we do not.
Okay. Item number 4, discussion and possible action. 4A, council input and discussion on 2021 International Code adoption and amendments to Chapter 14 and Chapter 38, City Code of Ordinance. We have a presentation by Jennifer Thomas Gomez, Director of Development Services. Jennifer.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Happy New Year. This is my first time seeing you. We're going to go through this really briefly, and the purpose of this is to give you an overview for what's coming, because when it's presented to you on the agenda, it may seem like a lot. So we just want to give you some information so you know what's going to be presented to you to take action on. So myself will do part of it on the International Building Code and some of those codes. And then Fire Chief Mario Partida is here as well to go over some of the amendments to the International Fire Code. We also have teams with us. I do have Kenneth Shavers, the city building official. So if you have not formally met him, he is here as well. And then Fire Chief Partida will introduce his team as well when he comes up. Very quickly on the international code, so as you know, life safety building codes, all of those are adopted by the international codes, is what the city uses. Cities use them for many, many years as the international codes, and then the predecessor to those international codes. It's a suite of codes, so it includes our building codes, residential codes, mechanical codes, all of the codes that our plan reviews, building inspections are reviewed under. These are common codes that are used across the country and around the world. So the codes themselves are not just specific to Missouri City, but are regulations that have been tested, commented on across the country. Just for a little background, they're published every 3 years. So what's going to be presented to you is going to be the adoption of the 2021 codes. So it's not because we're technically behind, but because the codes are published in 3-year cycles. And so we are currently the city adopted the 2015 codes, and what we're looking at is moving those codes, adopting the 2021 codes. Where are we at in terms of the area? Sugar Land and City of Houston recently adopted the 2021 codes that went in effect at the beginning of this year. Some of our neighboring cities are on various versions of the codes. Pearland, Rosenberg are on the 2018 version of the codes. Richmond and Stafford are still under the 2015 version of the codes. Our codes are adopted in the Codes of Ordinances, Chapter 14, Building Regulations, and Chapter 38, Fire Prevention and Protection Standards. And we do have cross-references because our codes work in collaboration with some of our other locally adopted codes, the Zoning Ordinance, Infrastructure Design Standards, and also Floodplain Management. So we're going to summarize tonight what the amendments are proposed for the codes, broken down into 3 categories: clarification and additions to general standards, updates to our locally adopted amendments, meaning where we take the codes and make them make sense for Missouri City, because again, these are international codes. So some of the provisions of those codes may need to be modified to work better locally for Missouri City. And then updates that the codes made in this version of the codes. So we're still working with our legal team on some of the general standards, but so you know what we are going to be presenting to you are providing for an effective date of the code's adoption. So what we'll present to you in an ordinance is to adopt the codes, but it doesn't mean that they have to take effect the moment that you adopt them. So this will give us time to get the word out to our business community, to our developers, to contractors, to let them know that these codes and amendments have been adopted. So we're looking at doing an effective date and establishing an effective date. Also, this gives us the opportunity to update some items in our code, including updating the fiscal year period for contractor registration, which is still back on our previous cycle. So this will give us an opportunity to clarify that, update it. Some of the concerns that we've heard from council will give us an opportunity to add some teeth into some of our ordinances, including clarifying standards on renewal, requirements for permit issuance, and also construction site regulations. We've heard a lot about construction site regulations, so this gives us the opportunity. So requiring waste containers on construction sites, so as you probably are aware, they have the opportunity to pull permits for putting waste containers, but we don't have a requirement that they put a waste container on their site. So this will give us the opportunity to establish those requirements to make sure that those construction sites are well maintained from start to finish. Some of the other code changes would be we're considering adopting Appendix G of the International Building Code, which would provide for flood-resistant development standards for buildings. So as we're talking about some of those sensitive areas along Knight Road or to the east of the city, as we see more development in some of those sensitive areas, this gives us better regulations to be able to support development in those areas. It also provides better clarification between our zoning ordinance and our building codes, and adopting standards that would exempt certain accessory structures. We've talked about some of those recently as well. A new code that the International Code Council released with this cycle were solar energy provisions. And so the recommendation will be for the city to adopt that, and that's basically solar panels. We know solar panels are not going away anytime soon, so this would be adopting those code regulations pertaining to solar panels. Property maintenance code is part of this suite of codes. This gives us the opportunity to adopt regulations regarding unsafe structures. The city currently has the substandard structure process. Property maintenance code has an unsafe structures process that we'd be looking at regulations to adopt standards regarding that. And then a new code change with this cycle are some standards in terms of the treatment of stagnant water for swimming pools. Okay. And then if anyone has a question about the effective date of some of these codes and whether or not it would apply to plans that are already in the cycle or plans that have been recently permitted, when you establish the effective date, anything that's come in, anything that's been permitted, anything that's been reviewed prior to that date, the new codes would not apply. It would only apply to those applications coming in after that effective date. So significant code changes from the I code is occupancy loads were increased and this was out of the 2018 changes, so if we adopt the 2021, it would be applicable to us. But occupant load increased for business areas from 100 square feet to 150. The number of plumbing facilities, this one we think will help some of our smaller businesses that have challenges with certain occupant loads where they have to provide 2 restrooms based on the size of the facility they're going in. This change would actually give them more flexibility, so it would reduce some of those costs for some of those small businesses going in to our centers. Game room standards, I know everybody is aware of escape rooms and those activities. The new code has regulations on those because obviously you're going to have places where people won't be able to see, won't be able to get out because that's what they're designed for. So this is, the new codes provide some more safety regulations to be able to regulate those types of facilities. And then play structures, there's some new regulations on interior finished material. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Fire Chief Partita.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
I also have with me this evening is Assistant Chief John Sabrasula. He's been working closely with legal on all the amendments and the document, and then also Fire Marshal DeFore, who is our subject matter expert in this area. Within the fire code, going from the 2015 to the 21, those are the items that you see mostly in the presentation. I've also provided you a supplemental document that are other items that we're reviewing as amendments or additions that are primarily specific to Missouri City that the Fire Marshal's Office is recommending. So we're working through some of those. The first one on the presentation, you can see is some of it has to do with 3D printing. These are all items that are current day practices that have moved into the 21 code. Hydrants distance have changed, and emergency radio communication coverage. We experienced a challenge in the 15 code when the Amazon building opened. There was some radio loss for our emergency responders in that building, so this kind of helps address that. But we were very successful with Amazon, where they partnered to put the proper repeaters in the building to make sure that our responders are covered. The fire code also addresses different spirits, the Group F, as well as smoke-proof enclosures. The fire code from 15 to 21 addresses the laboratories in schools, like chemical labs, so it addresses those further, and extraction facilities from different restaurants and businesses. The fire code also in Chapter 40, the IC regulates, again, the distilled spirits and how those are managed or handled, and then the extraction process of oils. So it's just a variety of codes that addresses that. Our amendments that I handed out, we have a philosophy that we looked at closely when we're looking at these, is we want to assure that, first, the safety of the businesses that are open in Missouri City are meeting the code and they're safe to operate. The second part is we benchmark them against our neighboring cities to make sure that we're not asking of standards that are going to push them to go build somewhere else. While we want them to open safely, we want to have standards that are consistent with our surrounding agencies. And currently, as we move into the 21 code, that'll mirror the Fort Bend County code. But we expect that the other cities will be moving soon within the same code. Part of the timing of especially the fire code adoption is tied to our ISO evaluation timing that is currently ongoing. We expect the evaluation team to be here the week of February 7th. And so we have to have the adopted code in place with a start date down the road. So that gives us the opportunity, like Jennifer said, to educate, do some open houses with small businesses to explain some of the code changes so they can prepare for those changes. We also look at, so the adoption of the 2021 code will tie points to our ISO rating. So it's a big point system within our ISO rating evaluation. And so we expect ISO has a window of anywhere from 60 to 90 days for an effective date after adoption. So we're working with it. We're trying to work within that window for adoption of the fire code. And so with that, the first hearing is on schedule for February 5th, with a second and final on February 19th, and with an effective date of ordinances sometime in April or May for the fire code. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Recognizing Mayor Pro Tem Lynn Clauser.
Yes, Chief, thank you. And I wanted to ask about Section 503.6.2, the gated entry systems, the modification for access for vehicle gates with the click-to entry system. Would that be for gated communities? Is that? It's
primarily the business gated community. So we use a click-to-enter system, which is tied to through our dispatch center to our actual fire trucks.
Okay.
Which it's how it sounds. We click, and it sends a code, and it opens that gate. Correct? So I think it's primarily designed for the businesses, not for like residential.
Okay.
We deal with those separately and differently.
And then the process for notifying these businesses, do y'all have that process together, like when you're going to start notifying and when their deadline is?
Not yet. We'll be working with the communications department to schedule out and plan out the entire marketing and prevention notices and the education piece with the businesses.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Recognizing Councilmember Maroulis.
This is not just for you, Chief, but what's our process for training staff to get knowledgeable of the 21 code? That's a lot.
It's a lot. And so on the building side, Kenneth Shavers, again, is the building official. So he has a program set up for our building inspectors to go through different training for their certification. And so the adoption of the new codes, it would just incorporate those new requirements. For the locally adopted amendments, we'll incorporate that into their training program as well.
So what's that look like, Jennifer? Is like 6-month training, every month training?
It's so, and to the ISO, there's a certain amount, I think it's 18 hours of training that are required minimal for each inspector position. And so we'll meet that threshold, but we'll probably exceed that threshold For our inspectors, they have a certain amount of time each month that they have to set aside for training.
Recognizing,
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Same with us, so we're going to identify what the changes are going from the 15 edition to the 21, plus the recommended code abbreviations that are before you. And we're going to train all of our inspectors. They already have the concept of the 15 edition of what we're currently in that they're knowledgeable of, and then we're just going to expand upon what these few changes are that are going to be in the inclusion of the 21 edition with these set amendments.
recognizing Councilmember Emery.
Yeah, I was looking at, this has to do with fire, section 507, 5.4.1. The hydrant distance of 100 feet. Is this strictly for business, or does this also refer to or relate to residential?
This is strictly for business. Currently, we have an amendment to our current ordinance. This is reverting back to the body of the code, or what's referenced to as the body of the code, which is written from the International Code Council. This does not apply to anything in the residential area. Appendix D is specific to the residential area that's found in the rear of this amendment document, which is still going to stay the same of 300 in commercial areas and 500 in residential with the spacing of the hydrant placements.
Just as a general question, is there anything in here, either from the business standpoint or the fire standpoint, that's going to be difficult and create any issues for us as far as development or any of the ordinances by fire?
No, we don't think so. We think that it's a gradual transition from code to code, and so there's nothing that we see that's going to surprise the community or the builders to go somewhere else.
And agree.
Anything? Yeah.
What we see is a little bit more flexibility in some of these codes, some of the ones that I mentioned. So we're not seeing any red flags right now from this code cycle.
Okay.
All right. Recognizing Councilmember Brown Marshall.
Okay. Thank you so much. Jennifer, did he want to?
Yeah, I think Kenneth
Okay.
wanted to say something.
I just want to let Councilman Maroulis know that all the code changes, what the code does, it puts out the significant change book, and it has all the code changes in that book. And what I do, I systematically go through those changes and see how they impact our community. And what I also did, I purchased one for the 2015 and 2018, since we didn't adopt the 2018. I also have one for the 18 to the 21s, so I can make those comparisons so that make sure that we don't miss anything and that we inform our community on if there's something that really will impact the community, we will address those at that point in time. And that's why we have a time frame before we implement the 21 codes so that we can inform the community of what's coming ahead, especially with the business going from 100 to 150 per square feet. What it entails is that the code goes by square footage. So therefore, the business will have a smaller occupant count with 150 versus 100. And then also on the restrooms, there used to be a 15 occupant threshold. So now there's an exception to code to a 25 occupant to where it would trigger a second restroom instead of one. And that way it also helps the small business person. That way they won't have to have two restrooms. They can just have one because the threshold is 25 instead of 15.
Wow. Okay. Good stuff.
That's really good. Okay, Kenneth, just before you go, that was some really good information.
Sure.
Did you see anything inside of the changes that could potentially harm our small businesses?
No.
Okay.
No,
okay.
I didn't. All I saw was a lot of things that would help. And that's what the Code Council does when they have their code meetings. They have all these speakers that go before them. And only time that you would see something that really impact them if some type of catastrophic event happened, and that's when those type of things would come into play. But I didn't see anything that would impact our small businesses.
Okay, I thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Jennifer, just a couple of more questions, if you don't mind. I was curious about the fencing requirement around certain construction sites. Could you give me some examples?
Sure. And so, and I think, and so that has come up in the past because I know in some of our master plan communities, they have requirements for when a site is under construction that it's secured.
Okay.
And so right now it's basically voluntary, for that construction site, that property owner, the developer, to secure their site by fencing. And then the type of fencing is up to them as well.
Okay.
So this gives us a little bit more, kind of teeth to establish that that all construction sites will be secured. So that will reduce, trash, debris, things, from flying off the site, and also help to screen those sites from view as well.
Okay.
And then it gives us a little bit more teeth in terms of material and time frame for that fencing as well.
Okay, that's really good to know. And then I had a question for Chief Petita, please.
Yes, ma'am.
You said on February the 7th, that's when you would have the ISO inspection?
They will come in and begin the evaluation.
Oh, and
So it'll
begin.
it'll take some time for them to go through all the documents
Okay.
and all our presentation. And so it'll take some time.
Okay.
And then it's submitted to the main company in New Jersey, and they go through a review. So there's a window for this time.
So with the timeline that you presented to us on tonight, we would have more than enough time to get this in place and to meet their requirements as well.
Yes, ma'am. We have a consultant that we're working with that is walking us through the process, and he has assured us that there's plenty of time to get this approved and then go through the evaluation.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Recognizing Councilman Raboni.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for the presentation. I had a few questions on a couple of the sections. The first one being section 907.12 on the false alarms and nuisance alarms. It states that this code section provides fire department to the ability to regulate these types of incidents. Currently, what happens with these numerous false alarms, and what do you mean by regulate, or giving you, what does that look like? Increased fines or?
Right. So adding this amendment allows us to start enforcement at some point. So right now, we're going to some of these alarms. So a fire truck is responding and going, out of service to go to these alarms. And like we mentioned here, these are just a few examples where we might go 12 times back to back, and they still can't, solve it or put it on test. And so right now, we don't have any enforcement capabilities with those multiple alarms.
So what will you do now that, or assuming that this is approved, the amendments, what would you be able to do differently?
We'll be able to set a threshold of how many is too many alarms, and we'll be able to set a standard in our enforcement capabilities.
So more fines or?
Or fines, warnings, and fines. Correct, sir.
All right, thank you. The other question I had is on section 202, ambulatory care facilities. What I noticed is not listed here are group homes or boarding homes, and I know a lot of them have ambulances that come pick up residents or drop them off at some of these facilities. Or is that not applicable to them? Is there a way that we can enforce certain requirements or things that they need to have in place at these boarding homes or group homes?
So there are others within the body of the code. These are additions to what's in the body of the code. So does it address the group homes?
So, Councilman Raboni, we currently do have regulation with boarding home and group homes. If they are permitted or if they are licensed from the state licensing department, we have regulatory authority over those style homes currently that are already adopted in our schedule of fees and our permitting capabilities.
So I don't believe that any of the group homes or boarding homes register with the city currently, do they? If they do, then how are we monitoring or ensuring that they're meeting these regulatory standards? And if not, is there something that we can implement or have in place so that they are forced to register with the city so that we can then go in and enforce or ensure that they're following the regulatory requirements?
Yes, sir. There is a Senate bill that was proposed and is now in place. That would be a discussion aside from this council or this code adoption that does give us further regulatory capabilities, but that would be in a different format of adoption that we would have to do specific to the regulation and the licensing of those particular style homes.
But
Joyce might be able to speak to that more because we went through this last year.
I think we've
homes?
looked at it
And the county is regulating that.
for a few years. There is a state law provision that allows the registration of boarding home facilities. However, if the city adopts boarding home regulations, then the city would have to allow those boarding homes in all residential areas despite zoning. And so right now we have a zoning ordinance in place that prohibits boarding homes in R1 and R2 areas, but with the adoption of boarding home regulations, state law provides that we would have to let those boarding homes in every residential area. We did try, I don't know if you recall,
Right.
to take that out legislatively, because if we could have that regulation without that requirement, it would probably be helpful, but we were not successful with that during the last session.
So basically what you're saying is those that currently are in our city that are identified as group homes, boarding homes, we cannot force them or require them to register with the city at all.
Currently, the ones that we do permit are licensed by the state of Texas. The ones that are licensed by the state of Texas, we are able to impose a fire code and have regulatory ability from the fire code perspective with those homes.
And we are doing
only if they are licensed by the state of Texas.
And
And
we're
we
doing
are
that.
currently doing that, yes, sir.
All right. Well, that's a conversation for another day.
Can I just add on the zoning side, your zoning on that, they are required to still meet the zoning requirements. So we do have them coming in for occupancy permits, but it is those that are licensed. So those that may not be licensed or fall under the radar, those are still the ones that are of issue. But those that are licensed, that require fire inspection or other inspection, do come through the permitting process. And then where they're protected by the state, then they go through that process.
So if we're made aware
Right.
that there are unlicensed boarding homes, group homes, and it's brought to our attention, are we saying there's nothing we can do about it based off of the zoning?
From a zoning perspective, they're required to have SUP approval if they're located and they're outside of the bounds of being licensed and under certain parameters. And so if they don't have SUP approval, then they don't have zoning compliance for operating there. So if you're aware of one and they don't fit those requirements and they have not, been licensed and they have not gone through that process, your zoning tools still work in the sense that they can be shut down from zoning approval.
Okay, well, that's what I wanted to hear because I'm not here. I wasn't hearing that if we become aware of someone that's not in compliance, that is not licensed and is in violation according to zoning, that we don't have the ability. I was hearing that we didn't have the ability to do anything, but you're saying we do. So, City Manager, is there something that we
Under zoning, and what it sounds like is that we probably need a separate item that solely focuses on that area of interest and that subject matter, whereby you all can receive additional information or an update on group homes.
All right, well, thank you. The last, Mayor, is relative to both combined 901-471 access and 903 water supply. Of course, Jennifer, you know the issues that we had with the old movie theater property. And I see here that this addresses riser rooms and, of course, the fire sprinkler systems. So I guess my question is, I'm assuming these things are discussed in the pre-planning meetings because it seemed to have caught the owner of that property off guard that after they purchased the property and were moving forward, and all of a sudden they were required to do a full-fledged sprinkler system that cost them close to $500,000. So what does this change do? Is this something that help existing property owners or is it make it better for them?
Yes, sir. So currently what this provision provides for us by definition of what a riser room is that's the particular room that grants the fire department and the building management and any repair service companies the ability to access the fire riser, which is the vertical pipe supplying the entire fire sprinkler system with water, and then the location of the fire alarm control panel, specifically in multi-tenant buildings. As of right now, there is the ability for a particular business owner to have the location of the fire riser as well as the fire alarm control panel within their individual business, granting them the ability to silence, reset, or even shut the water supply off that could affect the entire building. This gives us the ability in a multi-tenant building specifically just to have a room that provides exterior access not given to any individual tenant to be able to have control. And we've faced issues in previous tenants that have restricted our access to be able to get into that, which then prompted our requirement to then have to obtain search warrants to just get to the access and location of the fire riser and the fire alarm control panel. So this removes that only in multi-tenant buildings. They can still have a riser in the location they so deem in a single-tenant facility. This only is multi-tenant facilities when they are installing or when there is one installed in a existing facility similar to the Blink Fitness. So that system was existing in Blink. It was once Kroger for the institutional knowledge of what that structure used to be. There was the fire sprinkler system that was there. It was just in such a state of disrepair that they had to rehabilitate the entire system from the ground up because it was completely corroded. And so that's what prompted the issue specific to that business of having to rehabilitate the entire system. They anticipated not having to do that, and in theory, they should have just been able to go in and do an add relocate job specific for their design requirements, but they had to rehabilitate the entire system because it had such corrosion with that particular job.
And just to add, so this language does not address, this is just a separate, this has to do with access to those fire sprinkler rooms. So it's not a good example for the Blink Fitness. So this has nothing to do with, who's responsible for the sprinklers. This is for access into those sprinkler rooms in a multi-tenant building.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. City Manager, or City Attorney, do we need any action on this item? No. Okay.
Item number 5 is a closed executive session. The time is 6:03 p.m. And the City Council will now go into closed executive session pursuant to Section 551.074 and 551.071 of the Texas Government Code.
All right.
I don't see it.
Good evening. Good evening. The time is 6:32 p.m. City Council will now close the executive session back into to City Council special meeting. Since there's no action items, we're going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 6:33 p.m.